Hello, my name is Andrew, and when I was 11 years old, I saw the well-known documentary, The Pirates of the Caribbean, for the first and only time.
What do you mean by that?
I was immediately captivated by the exploits of the swashbucklers on screen. I mean, sailing around, evading capture, hunting for treasure, it all just looked so cool to my little boy brain. Yo-ho, a pirate's life for me. I'll have one pirate's life, please. But then I grew up and I realized I don't get to do any of that cool stuff in my adult life. And online piracy just doesn't hit the same when the greatest risk to my safety is malware instead of cannon fire. Maybe if I do something to impress the P's of the sea, then they'll want me to join their pirate gang. Now, I don't have any leads on any treasure, and I don't think I'm being chased, right? He's right behind me, isn't he? So that leaves me with one option. I need to sail to the Caribbean to prove that I'm worthy to join the crew of the Black Pearl. So come on, join me on my journey to fulfill my dream and become a pirate. This is a Juno Sun Odyssey 47DS, and it is not my boat. This is my boat. It is an alcort super sailfish Mark II manufactured sometime between 1959 and 1975. It is a lateen-rigged wetboard sailing dinghy, which I'm pretty sure is just pirate speak for looks like this, and it's been sitting in a boat graveyard for the better part of a decade. I hate to say it, but I think this boat is going to need a complete overhaul before I even think about sailing northeast of Panama. According to this documentation I found, the Mark II should weigh around 100 pounds, but this feels closer to twice that. I'm gonna have to crack into it and see what's causing all that extra weight. No problem for the old Jetta though. God, I love that car. Now that I've got this thing up on some sawhorses, I'm gonna remove and save any hardware I can, like this cleat and these little loops. These seem like some really bespoke pieces of hardware, and it seems like it would suck to lose them. Especially this little piece of wire. It looks pretty important, and I don't want to have to find another one.
Sometimes foreshadowing is relatively obvious.
In order to truly clean out the interior, I think I have to remove the deck from the hull. With this in mind, I remove this aluminum trim and I sand down this lip in hopes of finding a seam. I then go around the entire perimeter and separate the deck from the lower hull with a chisel and a hammer. This process was definitely a little bit destructive, and there are a few spots that I'm gonna have to repair later. The next step is to use a Dremel and a hacksaw to cut through these two channels for the dagger board and the mast. While I'm cutting through these last two connections, I'm trying to cut up and remove these large chunks of styrofoam that were used to give the deck support. Fun fact, this boat had an ant colony living inside of it. I do feel kinda bad for destroying their home, but then again, I kinda don't, because one of them crawled on my hand, and it was fucking gross.
Death to your bloodline.
With the deck free from the boat, I can remove it and really start cleaning out the interior. Basically, if anything looks gross or like excess fiberglass and epoxy, I want to grind it away. It's pretty apparent that this boat has had some accidents and repairs in the past, so I'm taking note of any damage and getting a head start on some reinforcement. The tail is in especially bad shape, so I'm probably going to have to completely rebuild it. But unfortunately, that's going to have to wait. The summer is coming to an end, and I have to put this project on hold for a little while. Let's just hope nothing goes wrong during the winter. Rest in peace, you beautiful beast. As soon as the weather got nice again, I got back to work grinding and sanding the interior of the hull. I want to get this hull back down to good solid material before I start building it back together. I suppose now is as good a time as any to reiterate that this boat is made out of fiberglass. I would strongly advise against working with this hull material, if you can avoid it. Every time I do any grinding on the hull, I basically produce a gigantic cloud of microscopic needles that enjoy finding homes in my skin. Every grinding step results in me being painfully itchy for at least a couple days. I cannot overstate how irritating this shit is. This portion of the project felt like my personal Vietnam. With my masochism satisfied, it's time for me to start thinking about how I'm gonna put this whole thing back together. My plan is to use these little stumps as a kind of mold to make these fiberglass collars. If I glue these collars to the corresponding holes on the underside of the deck, then, in theory, I'll be guaranteed that the holes are perfectly aligned. At this point, I move the hull to the ground and repair any weak points in the interior, including this big crack in the tail. Then, I use a combination of ratchet straps and pieces of firewood to support the edges. It's important to do this because the thin fiberglass tends to sag under its own weight, and if I tried to glue it up without aligning it first, then I'll end up permanently bonding it in the wrong place. After aligning the hull, I have to start thinking about how I'm going to provide the deck with support. Instead of just replacing the foam blocks and expanding foam, I figured I could probably save some weight if I took some inspiration from these plans for the wooden version of the Super Sailfish, the Mark I. The Mark I has these little wooden supports that are basically cross sections of the hull, and I'm mimicking them with some 2-inch thick styrofoam insulation. The plans give me some direction of where these should go, so I just cut them oversize and trim as needed so it's a snug fit. I also cut some of these rectangular supports to fill some of the void space, since the fiberglass deck of my Mark II is probably a lot more flimsy than the wooden deck of the Mark I. Now, you might be wondering if I have any experience in boats. But the answer is no, not really. I mean, sure, I've been on a few, but I'm not a sailor. I wouldn't say I've ever been a seaman. Well, I guess technically. I don't want to get into the fluid dynamics of it all, but suffice it to say that I don't have much experience fixing boats. If I didn't find these old plans online, I would have been completely lost. After marking and trimming the supports to be flush with the deck, I secure them in place with some silicone adhesive. One of the last steps for the interior is to make some new wood backings for all the hardware. I cut and shape these out of some scrap wood, and then I clean up any rough edges on the belt sander. This just in, we're getting a weather alert. Let's go to our reporter in the field for an update. Over to you, Andrew.
It started raining. I got these wood backing pieces for the railings, so they're nice and flush. These two wood pieces here, simple wood pieces. There's going to be 2 pieces of hardware deck there. Also, as soon as it stops raining, do some gluing up.
After gluing down the wood components, I sand all the contact surfaces in preparation for gluing it up. For most of this project, I'm using this 2-part epoxy from Sailboat. I specifically went with this one because it was available with this long cure hardener. I knew this project was going to take a lot of epoxy, and I was hoping that this would give me a little bit more working time before things start to set up. On that topic, it's finally time to reunite the deck with the hull. This is pretty much make or break for this project. If I screw this up, I will have wasted months of work. With the help of some family and friends, I lay out a linear gigafuck of fiberglass and mix up a metric shit ton of epoxy and apply liberally to every surface. After gently persuading the mast and daggerboard holes into place, I apply these clamps every 6 inches or so around the perimeter of the boat. And I think this is my first major mistake so far. I probably should have had twice as many of these little clamps to make sure that I was getting even compression all the way around. Unfortunately, after curing for a few days, there are all these gaps around the lip that are definitely not watertight. Well, that's no problem. I'll just grind away all those spots that aren't bonded and reinforce. Now that I've exposed all the gaps in my hull, I cover them with some heavily saturated fiberglass. I also take this opportunity to make sure the tail is completely watertight. On the bright side, my alignment collars worked pretty much perfectly. I just have to grind away a little bit of excess fiberglass in the holes. The deck is finally ready for its first coat of paint. I sand the entire surface to ensure a good bond, and I roll on a thin layer of this white marine paint. This isn't sponsored by Sailboat or anything, but I'm really happy with this surface finish. I was kind of worried I was going to have to get a sprayer, but this is looking really nice. Once the top is dry, I flip the boat over and finish repairing and reinforcing any damage. Then, after sanding and cleaning, I paint the bottom. I give the bottom and the top each one more coat of paint, and then I use this little syringe filled with epoxy to glue on this rubber bumper for protection in case of collision. This was kind of finicky because the epoxy acted almost like a lubricant, so I wound up using almost an entire roll of painter's tape just to secure it in place. The epoxy did react a little bit with the paint and turned it kind of yellow, so I do give the top one more coat of paint so that it's all nice and bright white. With the hull complete, I can get to work cutting and shaping all the wood components. Fortunately, I was able to find modernized daggerboard and rudder designs for the Super Sailfish online. The daggerboard sticks straight down in the middle of the boat, kinda like a keel. Along with the rudder, it helps translate force on the sail into motion in the water. I cut out the profile of the daggerboard on some 3/4 by 12-inch oak board and use a flap disc on an angle grinder to cut in the radius and the bevels according to the plans. I also shape these two handle pieces and chisel out these recesses on either side. These recesses will hold springs that lock the daggerboard into its slot. For the rudder, I marked the outline and cut it out of some of the same oak board. I used the same angle grinder technique to bevel the edges. Then I cut out a couple simple pieces for the tiller to control the rudder direction. I decided it was worth it to buy this specialty rudder mount, but I'm going to be making some of my own aluminum brackets to link the tiller to the rudder. Finally, I outline, cut, and shape these two matching railings for either side of the boat. All of these wood pieces get sanded up to 220 grit and then several coats of varnish until they're glossy and waterproof. Finally, I shape this pin that attaches to some springs that hold the rudder in the down position while sailing. Once I'm happy with the wood finish, I assemble the daggerboard and the rudder. Then I can buff up the recovered hardware and install everything on the deck along with a handle and drain plug I found online. I decided it would be best to just replace all the old screws, and I went with brass because it looks like gold, and now I just have to install that cable loop and... oh. The mast and spars would have cost me around $600 from a retailer, and that's not even including shipping. So I ordered some aluminum tubing in the specific dimensions I needed from a local metal supplier. Since I picked them up myself, there was no shipping cost, and I got all 3 pieces for just $200.
So good and tasty.
My spar tubes are actually 4 inches too long, so after cutting them down to size, I deburr and install the end caps. The spars are linked at one end by 2 interlocking eye bolts, so I use a blowtorch to heat the steel red hot and bend the loops together. I then drill the corresponding holes in the tubes and assemble. The sail is mounted to the spars with some plastic clips, and after some finishing touches, I'm finally ready to set sail.
He's finally here.
You're the best pirate I've ever seen.
Oh, Captain, my Captain.
Over the winter, I was made aware, rather rudely, that The Pirates of the Caribbean is not a documentary. Oh, Andrew, how could you not know that? Well, I closed my eyes during the scary parts, okay? And that just so happens to be the times when they turn into skeletons. Also, this lake is completely landlocked. There's no access to the ocean. Yeah, I should have thought of that. That one's on me. So yeah, I didn't get to fulfill my pirate dreams, but it's not a total loss. I mean, I have a sailboat now. Sure, I don't exactly have a lot of room for booty, but it occurred to me during this project that this thing is an antique. It was brand new 60 years ago. I mean, just think about how many people have sailed it, crashed it, and fixed it up. I get to add to that history now, and it feels really cool to be able to breathe new life into this object for hopefully another 60 years. In closing, this project was a lot more involved and expensive than I was expecting, but despite the specialty paint and bespoke hardware and shards of glass in my eyes, I'd say it was worth it. When I catch the wind just right and everything works, it feels pretty sick. Anyway, bye.